I'm happy, I'm carefree, and I'm gay. Yes, I'm gay. Take the purpose of fact I was born this way.
Welcome to the Rock's Back Pages podcast. My name's Barney Hoskins, and I'm in London with my RBP colleagues Jasper, Miras, and Bowie.
Hello, Barney.
And William Pike.
Hi, Barney.
Joining us all the way from San Francisco is Mr. Barry Walters. Welcome, Barry.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Great to have you.
Here with you.
Yeah, here, whatever here means conceptually.
Here is pretty good, and here with you is also good.
Thanks, Barry. Our guest started out writing for The Village Voice before establishing himself at Spin and Rolling Stone. He was the pop critic at the San Francisco Examiner and wrote regularly for The Advocate and Out magazine, many other publications. And in this episode, we're going to ask Barry about his wonderful new book, Mighty Real, A History of LGBTQ Music, 1969 to 2000. Let's start at the beginning, Barry, if that's okay with you. What are your memories of growing up in Rochester, New York? I mean, and were you in any sense like the archetypal small town boy who dreamed of moving to New York?
Sure. Well, Rochester, New York, I imagine it is analogous to maybe Manchester or Birmingham. It was at the time a two-company town. Everyone's dad either worked at Xerox or Kodak, and mine didn't. And I think I had a perfect childhood to become the person I became and become a rock critic, in that my sister is 12 years older, my brother is 15 years older, and that meant that I experienced Beatlemania and the British invasion and psychedelic rock as a very small child. My first memory is of a scene in the Beatles' Help where Ringo gets his hand stuck in the hand dryer because they're trying to take his ring from him. The villains are. But that I remember that at age 3. So that's probably indicative of a lot of things. My sister had a dance studio, which meant that there was music going all the time. Rhythm was very important. Performance was important. She would point out people on TV who could dance really well. Like, there's James Brown. He's the hardest working man in showbiz. And look at the Temptations and the Supremes at their dance moves. And she would also, between her and my mother, we would go to see Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity, or plenty of musicals. Dancing and music was there as a constant. And I learned how to play drums. At my school, the theater club was a big deal because the suburb itself was so boring. And that's where all the interesting, kooky people like me ended up. So I got really immersed in theater, and the combination of the theater interest combined with what was happening in New York at the time in the mid to late 70s with CBGBs and punk rock and bands like Talking Heads and Blondie and the Ramones, that made me just really want to get to New York. Probably I also wanted to get there because I knew there would be more people like me. Being that Rochester's a company town, there's a premium paid on everyone being like everyone else. Like, all the kids had really short hair, and I took my cues from the Beatles and the Monkees, and later the Partridge Family and the Jackson 5, and then ultimately Bowie, and that really set me apart. But the things that set me apart also made me feel connected to the bigger world and my future gay community.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like that was, as you say, a really good start musically, etc. In Mighty Real, Barry, you mention the writer Vince Aletti,
Yes,
outing himself in a 1972 piece for Cream, which was a bold thing to do in 1972. Actually, I pulled out that issue of Cream from our archive and read it, and it's fascinating. It's called Tighten Up, isn't it? And it was an amazing piece.
Yeah.
What was your general sense of how gay musicians were treated in the music press in that decade, in the 70s?
Sure. Well, I think it depends on what kind of press. I also started out as an avid music consumer very early because there's a store in Rochester. It still exists. It's quite infamous, called the House of Guitars, one of the largest guitar stores in all of the East Coast, and also an incredible record store. And they had imports, they had indie label records, and they also had magazines like Cream and Circus. And so I would devour those. I can't say that I read that particular article, but I am pretty sure that I read Vince and read about John Waters and Patti Smith and the New York Dolls in a way that most American teenagers were not reading that stuff. They were oblivious of those things. But to me, that was like, oh, these are my people. Whether they're straight, like the New York Dolls, or bi, or something undefinable like David Bowie, or, really queer like Freddie Mercury, those people really spoke to me. And I think that, Cream had a kind of, I'm not going to say it's queerness, but they definitely presented themselves left of center. Like, we're not Rolling Stone. We're hipper than that. And we are into things that are kind of weird, like John Waters and Patti Smith. So I thought all of that stuff was just, that was it. That was what I wanted to learn more about.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting to hear you say that, because I think there's certainly people who would say that some of the writing in Cream and generally in the music press in America was quite homophobic.
That's true.
And the F word, which, I mean, ironically, Vince uses in that piece. I mean, the word faggot, he uses that in quite a sort of defiant way. I mean, he sort of owns that term in quite a kind of defiant way in that piece. But then, you think of even people like Lester Bangs, who I don't think was homophobic per se, but often the writing, they would refer to David Bowie as like faggy or something, right?
That's right.
So So I wondered if you'd had any memories of that. I do think Cream, as you say, was like really quirky in many ways, and it was probably more receptive to. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think there was a really pronounced double standard, even in the so-called underground that Cream was a part of, because as we both said, there's this gravitation towards the unusual, the eccentric, the stuff that is rejected by the mainstream, and yet it's being presented in a very male heterosexual way. Like, okay, we are guys speaking guy language. We're not going to censor ourselves for the sake of women, for the sake of people of color, frankly, because I believe the N-word was also used. And we are not going to worry about these gay guys, these quote unquote faggots, because they're not reading our book. Our gay friends. Now, I'm pointing out the double standard of, the Ramones were in part managed by Danny Fields, who was one of the most beloved characters in the whole rock and roll Cream underground scene. And he was unapologetically gay. He just wasn't gay in the sense that maybe the disco gays were, or the gays who were only living a gay lifestyle, whatever that was. He was the acceptable gay. Just as there are the acceptable Black people in any music scene, right? So I did get that double standard, and I have to say it was not the best thing to be growing up with, because I think even I would say myself, I don't know if I used gay slurs, but I do remember actually sort of appropriating them. Like, I and my friends called ourselves the drama fags, because we knew that, anyone our adversaries all thought we were queer, whether we were or not. And plenty of my friends were not. They just liked doing theater and liked hanging out with people like me. So yeah, I try to absorb some of that double standard and reconcile it for who I was and how I wanted to fit into the world.
I mean, I've always thought it was, one of the great ironies that I don't think a single one of the New York Dolls was gay, right?
Right.
I think they were all, and yet, I mean, yeah, who could forget the cover of the first album? I mean, it was the most extreme sort of image of, I mean, it's, I've never forgotten the first time I saw that.
Barry, you write in the preface to the book, which I love, by the way, and it's a wonderful document of all kinds of queernesses in music in different guises, which I think is great. I love the breadth of your attitude towards what you choose to write about. But you write in the preface about having the experience that is shared by many, and this is what you write as well, of essentially queering songs, hearing a song that is by a woman addressed to a man and feeling like this is for me. How important was it for you growing up to have that experience? When did you start making that realization that these songs spoke to you, even if they weren't sort of designed to? And conversely, how important is it to have songs that are designed and do represent you in a sort of real and authentic sense?
Sure. I think many people who love music, who have older brothers and sisters, they remember that moment where it's the first time that they really pick something for themselves. Like, they grow up and they're the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or whatever constantly playing in the background in the brothers or sisters' bedrooms or living rooms or whatever. But for me, David Bowie was the first that, like, I read about him, and they used that word bisexual. I was only 11 years old. I didn't know what that meant, but this guy looked so cool. And the way they described him was so compelling. I didn't know what bisexual sounded like. So I bought the first thing that I could afford, and that was around the 45 of Space Oddity, which it was probably climbing the charts, but I hadn't even heard it yet. And I was born on the first day, the first U.S. manned space Apollo mission, right? So I was given space toys as a kid. And the whole thing about going into space and being adrift and feeling like you're separate from the people around you and you may never come back to them, that was something I understood on a level. It wasn't clear to me that it had anything to do with queerness, but I got into it. I really felt it. And I felt, and looking back, I can understand why. I can understand the alienation and all that, but you don't understand that really when you're 11. And then I think, I remember a kid who was friends of my friends. He was from another high school, but he was stereotypically gay. And he was helping out to do makeup in the theater group. And he lent me a Village People album and a Donna Summer album. The Donna Summer album is significant because it's Once Upon a Time, where she plays this kind of Cinderella character looking for a prince who'll, solve all her problems and, take her off to Fantasyland or whatever. And I remember being 16 probably and thinking, okay, here's a song, Fairy Tale High. Okay. And another song called Queen for a Day. This sounds like it's about gay experience, and yet she's never using those words, and yet the whole thing just felt really gay. And to get that with the Village People, which was really gay, right? They're singing, this wasn't on the Macho Man album. They go from Macho Man, celebrating all sorts of macho, to the song, I Am What I Am. And it's clearly, I am gay, and that is okay, and you got to fucking deal with it. Can I use that word? I think
yeah.
I probably can,
Absolutely.
right? You're English. So, yeah. So hearing those two records together in tandem brought me into the secret gay disco world. And it was kind of like punk rock in a way, right? Because you're getting this stuff that's not handed to you. Well, in America, we did not hear punk rock on normal radio for several years. You had to go into you had to seek it out. You had to go to a record store or go to a special concert, and that became part of the ritual. And the stuff with disco, I could tell it was the same way. And to me, that was really cool. I knew these things are supposed to be antithetical, but I thought, if I like disco as a punk rock guy, that makes me really punk, because I don't give a fuck if you like it or not. So that's how I came to that kind of music. And going back, I moved to New York in 1979, where there was Harvey Milk had been assassinated in San Francisco in 78, but the whole Anita Bryant movement, that was the first time that gay quasi-celebrity, because she had hits, I guess, in America, old hat pre-rock and roll hits, or at least they were not, they were before my time. And here she's campaigning against gay people, but the mainstream, at least in America, rebelled against her. They're like, no, don't come with us telling us what to do. And this was a lot of the straight people. They felt like, this is, you're being uncool telling people what to do, and we'll boycott your orange juice and whatnot. So then when I got to New York City, soon after, the whole New Romantic thing happened. And that was very gay, sometimes very overtly, but some of those songs even at the time I thought, there's something gay going on in To Cut a Long
story short.
Yeah, by Spandau Ballet and Muscle Bound.
Muscle Bound, definitely, yeah.
And then,
I don't see it personally. No.
And I went to clubs where that music was played, and they were not gay clubs, quote unquote. It wasn't a gay scene, but there were gay people, and there was the embrace of gayness. So that made me hopeful that I could be me. I could dance with the first guy I was dating. I could dance with him and my female friend, and we could all dance together, and no one's going to hassle us. I can go to the Mud Club, which is the super hippest place. No one's fucking with us. We're just being ourselves. And that was a great message to get. I didn't have to be a gay, like cut my hair a certain way to be gay and go off with the gays. I can just be it on the scene that welcomed me and my straight friends and my female friends. And that's the world I wanted to live in.
Beautiful.
That's lovely. Yeah. That's really, really nice to hear. Given your book is called Mighty Real, was Sylvester still alive when you moved to San Francisco? Was he already gone?
Well, that's an important piece of the puzzle. I came out here because I heard that Sylvester he didn't march, but he was in a wheelchair in the 1988 San Francisco Gay Pride March. So he was pushed in a wheelchair in the People with AIDS contingent. And this was the very first time any, not just musical, but any kind of celebrity claimed their status. They did the hardest work of fighting the epidemic by saying what you may have heard about. It's true. Or even with Sylvester, there was no rumor. He just went and said, I have HIV. I have AIDS. Here I am in this wheelchair, but I'm still fighting alongside you. That was really powerful. So I told the people at the Village Voice, hey, let's not wait until this guy dies. Let's celebrate him now while we still can. Yep. So I came out here to interview him, and I came out to interview for a job at the San Francisco Examiner. And I stayed here and I got the job. And unfortunately, he died I came out here. I remember it was, Thanksgiving week. That's late in November. And he died the very next month. And I probably spoke to him a couple months before that. He was very ill. Although I had HIV positive friends and I had lost my dad, not to HIV, but to alcoholism when I was 17, nothing really prepared me for seeing someone who was that afflicted with AIDS. And AIDS was a particularly merciless malady. It was brutal. And sometimes people had good days and sometimes they did not. And to interview someone who represented gay life and gay spirit and gay spirituality so close to death, it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done professionally and just personally.
Yeah, I bet. At the Examiner, Barry, how quickly did you start to focus on LGBTQ artists and issues as one of your focuses, let's say, and how was that received at the paper?
It was I started right away in that my Village Voice piece was run in full in the Examiner before I even got there. And I remember a black secretary at the office saying, "Oh, we've never had someone who could write about black music and black culture." Because Sylvester, of course, was not just gay, he was black. And he embraced both sides of that in a very powerful, very unapologetic way. And she felt I captured that. So she she introduced me to NWA. I went to an NWA show before they became mainstream, and there were gunshots in the concert. So that was sort of a big deal. And then, I don't know where you stand on the Grateful Dead, but they had me writing about the Grateful Dead. And if you're not talk about an alternate reality, if you go to a Grateful Dead show, you're not in for just watching the show and clapping, along. It's an immersive thing. Yeah. And as someone who grew up with alcoholism, it was extreme to see. Believe me, I've gone to a lot of extreme punk rock shows, but I had never experienced something so extreme. Like I had never seen people that high before, where they're wobbling so much that you have to step aside.
Dodge.
Yeah, exactly. Compared to that, people pogoing and bouncing off each other, that I could handle. Because those people weren't so high. Maybe on speed they were, but still speed is a little more predictable than acid. So I wrote about that, and a whole bunch of people were like, right on, I'm so glad you captured that stuff unapologetically. And so many other people were like, fuck you, New Yorker, you come in here and you shit on our culture. Fuck you. So that and my photo was in the paper, which meant that I was a target. People could recognize me at the drugstore and come at me and be like, very pro or con. I realized I became a very pro and con kind of person. And as I stayed here and as I honed my craft, because if you're going from weekly journalism to daily journalism, it's a whole nother thing where you have to really think, you have to improvise like a jazz musician, and you have to be confident that the riffs that you come up with at the top of your head at 1:00 at night, because they're going to go in the paper the next late morning, uncorrected, unedited by anyone who knows anything about music. You've got to be tough and you've got to be spontaneous. So that's what I learned to be. And gradually people respected me. Even the naysayers, they were like, yeah, he can write about Metallica and he can write about Katie Lang and embrace all the stuff in between and show some competency and maybe even some insight. So, it was trial by fire, but I never left. I'm still here.
Yeah, exactly. In the book, you talk about a Katie Lang gig in 1988 as your first quote unquote all lesbian show. And you write obviously a lot about Katie Lang, and you talk about an interview you did with Melissa Etheridge. You talk about Indigo Girls. How closely aligned were the different LGBTQ communities in cities like San Francisco and New York? And to what degree did music bring them together?
Well, I'd seen Katie Lang at the Bottom Line, a famous New York venue, opening for Chris Isaak. And they both had a kind of retro-y feel, right? And kind of a cheeky presentation, like, I'm going to wink at you a little bit, but I'm going to do this music really well. So you can't quite tell if it's a parody or if it's the real thing. And that had, I remember some of my editors just being kind of feeling mixed about both of them. I got into both of them, particularly Katie. And then when I saw her again, it was a New Year's Eve show just right after I'd moved here. And people really want to be with their people on New Year's Eve, right? You don't want to go off and do something off the beaten path. You want to be with your friends and the kind of people you want to be with on that particular day of the year. So I went, and I would say it was probably 98% female with a smattering of gay guys like me. Maybe the women were all gay, maybe they weren't. But when she sang things like Big Bone Gal, which is a song off her recent album, these girls in the audience, they were freaking out. Like, it was like Beatlemania, except not like girls screaming at a guy, but girls screaming at another girl who's representing their experience Like, okay, I don't fit the skinny prototype that women must typically fit into in order to be acceptable in the mainstream. I'm going to be a little bit chunky and I'm going to embrace it and jump around. Katie Lang, I mean, she has sort of an Iggy Pop quality to her where you don't know what she's going to do. It is really spontaneous. And to be in that energy, I have to say, is one of my favorite shows I had ever seen, because it was unlike anything I'd experienced. And I had already experienced a lot. In New York, the gay community is absorbed by a lot of other urbane people who may or may not be queer. So there's more ambiguity and more fluidness in terms of the scene. San Francisco is a little bit more like, who's gay. And lesbians, they have what they call lesbian invisibility, because they're not as seen by the mainstream, not as recognized by the mainstream as gay men are. And part of it is because if you're not seen by men, then you're really not seen. If you're not seen by a straight guy, then you're really not seen. And at a show like this, man, the visibility level was off the charts, and it was great. I loved it. I never felt like, oh, you shouldn't belong here. No, I felt really a part of it, and I wanted to see more of this kind of show. So I did report on Indigo Girls and Frank and other musicians who had that kind of crowd. Two Nice Girls. There were quite a few at that time, and I loved it. It's a real break from the male, because when you go to a rock show, even if there are women in the band, it's mostly guys in this show, in the crowd, right? It's a guy thing. That's changed a bit as I've grown older and music has become more female identified from so many pop stars.
Yes.
But especially in the late 80s and early 90s, to be in that energy, man, it was radical and it was rock and roll to me.
She was a big bone gal from southern Alberta. You just couldn't call her small. You can bet every Saturday night she'd be heading for the Legion Hall.
Beautiful. I just want to bring in William here because it's his only his second appearance on the Rock's Back Pages podcast. So just wanted to get your take on Barry's book, William, and what kind of, what you've learned from it and what was new to you in terms of history.
Yeah. Well, Barry, I'd just like to say I really, really enjoyed the book. I thought it was really engaging and really lucid. And what impressed me most was that you obviously had the through line of LGBT and the history of that through music, but it was just so broad and you managed to thread so much together through it. And, everything from the UK to the US to men, women, straight women identifying with gay men. It's, it was very, very interesting in that vein. One of the things that you said before that I'd like to pick up on is just the fact that you were listening to Patti Smith and sort of alternatives to the mainstream culture like Beatles, Rolling Stones. You were getting into Bowie. Was there something other than just identifying with it, the fact that it was alternative in itself gave it an allure, particularly in that it wasn't the mainstream?
Well, Bowie started out in America, particularly. There's no American equivalent of Top of the Pops. There was a syndicated radio show, Casey Kasem Top 40. But there was no TV show that everyone watched with their friends, their brothers and sisters, and even their parents. So Bowie's entry to the mainstream was unlike how it happened in England, where he sings Starman. He acts very familiarly with his guitarist. There's no question that some kind of gayness is coming at you. And in fact, Bowie would just like point right at the camera, right at the viewer to say, here comes the gayness. Pew! It's going right through the screen, right to you. Which I love that about Bowie. But we didn't have, he was on TV shows, yes, but his ascent and the whole glam rock thing sort of took a while to bubble up from the underground. And I think it was important. You know, I think when you're young, you identify with things that are coming up, right? You don't necessarily.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess it's different now, but back then, you identified with whatever was the latest thing. And Bowie was just so happened to be the latest thing right at the time when I needed it, right? So he gave me a lot of affirmation, and he went through all these changes that I think really informed the book in a way that I hadn't really thought about until you mentioned the breadth of the book. Yeah. Well, the breadth of the Bowie catalog, of course, is extraordinary, maybe singular. And that, you know, when he would do, I bought Sly and the Family Stone and Kool and the Gang, but when Bowie embraced that kind of music, it made me feel like, oh yeah, it's cool to like that stuff. I don't have to apologize for it. I don't have to be in this little narrow box. And that, I think, that's sort of a metaphor for the queer experience. You don't have to have others define you. You can define yourself and be yourself on your own terms and let the others deal with it. And also take a negative, right? Like Bowie is not the most macho guy in the world, right? But he figured out a way to take his particular vibe as a person and say aggressive with it. Like, I'm not going to hide that I'm an alien. I'm going to even say that I'm an alien. Like, I come from another planet. And he did that metaphorically through fictional characters. But I really think, I'm sure I would have been interested in all the kinds of music that I did, but maybe I wouldn't have consumed it so early and with such gusto had it not been for Bowie.
I think actually some of the most interesting people you write about for me are the ones who, like Bowie, had within themselves a huge amount of breadth, like Grace Jones and Michael Jackson, who also just have eras or who are able to kind of code switch in different years and different outputs of music. And that has a weird or just, I don't know, an uncanny resemblance to all queer music that you discuss in your book.
The book is very strong on divas and the whole kind of symbiosis really between female divas and particularly gay men. And William just mentioned the great Grace Jones, so who you describe beautifully as a warrior of individuality and pleasure. And your chapter on Grace prompted us to add our first ever audio interview with her. So at this point, I thought it'd be good to hear 2 or 3 clips from this interview. So Jasper, would you kindly just tell us about the interview?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Richard Cook speaking to Grace Jones in 1985. And it's right around when she's in A View to a Kill, the Bond film, playing May Day as what she describes as a Disney cartoon, which is interesting. And they talk quite a bit about that film and what it means for her to be in it, and how she feels about playing roles that have her killing a lot of people, as Richard Cook sort of with a slightly raised eyebrow asks her. But she's very, very interesting and talks about not taking herself too seriously, and herself as a person not taking herself too seriously, but taking her music very seriously, which I think is a very sharp distinction to draw. And I think that we'll listen to some clips, but the sense that you get listening to this interview is that she has a really good sense of humor about what it is that she's doing. And that's born out of just being so confident in knowing who she actually is as a singer, as an actor, as a model, as a person. The first clip is about being born different. And I think that again, she's had that confidence. She's had to have that confidence maybe from a young age.
I can't run out of ideas to be different. I was born different. You know, it's me. And when I run out of me, then who am I? You know, I think I would hope I would have an imagination, and if I did run out of me, I could be someone else that was still interesting. You know, and not like you said, fitting in with everything else, blending in.
Well, that says everything about the non-conforming of a Grace Jones, doesn't it?
I love the description, Barry, that you borrowed of Grace Jones is from Ebony magazine, who described her in 1979 as a question mark followed by an exclamation point. And I just think that's a great description. And you also write that she remains adored by just about everyone on the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or otherwise queer and questioning spectrum, not merely because she sings songs that address that, but also because she embodies those songs. And there's a clip from this interview where Richard Cook asks her about her quote-unquote man-eater image. And let's just listen to it, because it's the way that she answers it, I think, is very graceful.
It's a kind of phrase. Well put.
There's this thing about your man-eater reputation and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've always thought that women would be more threatened by you, feel more threatened by you than men.
I don't know.
Because the idea of man-eating woman is quite a kind of sort of cliche now.
No, well, man-eating is because I don't fit into the female role, but men go down. I get it.
Well, that's why I should think that perhaps more women get hostile toward you.
Oh no, I would hope I'm more the hero at this point, for progress' sake,
Which is interesting. There's a lot about gender in that. What's your reaction to that, Barry? What do you make of her response?
Well, I'm going to give you a story that's not in the book. An early version of that chapter had been printed in Pitchfork. And I had heard that she was a big fan of it. And she wanted to reprint it in her Hollywood Bowl program. And I said, and she was on her way to San Francisco or the Bay Area. I forget if it was Oakland or San Francisco itself. But anyway, I said, sure, I'll do it and you can have it for free. But I want to meet you because before I die, I've got to meet Grace Jones. So that was arranged. And my husband and we had these super backstage passes, and we went into literal underground of this venue where there's no one except the occasional roadie walking around. And we could hear Grace Jones at the end of the hallway yelling, where's my assistant? I have no clothes. I have to wear my street clothes. And then the manager's like, okay, but you need to get dressed because Barry Walters is waiting to meet you, that writer. She's like, I don't want to be interviewed now. And they're like, no. This is the guy who wrote the article that you liked. And we're not, so she's not saying this for our benefit. We hear her saying, Oh, I love that article. Yeah, bring him on. So she steps out into the hallway. She's only got a towel in front of her. And so she's naked, right? And my husband runs over and he finds her assistant. And we start talking while she's getting ready. And I have to say that the whole man-eater business, that's a side to her personality. That is something she plays. But to me, she was so nice, so sweet, so appreciative. In fact, she was kind of motherly. Like she said, "Oh, you have something special, dear, and I want you to never stop. I want you to keep writing, and because it's really unique." And even as I walked away, she's pointing at me like, "You keep on writing now. Don't ever stop." So I'm like, wow. So whenever I feel like my writing is not up to snuff, I think, okay, I managed to please the subject who, if she's not happy, I mean, she famously smacked one of your interviewers, an English interviewer who asked her something she felt was inappropriate.
As Russell Harty. Is that the famous Russell Harty TV interview? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I want to say something that I think Brits may not understand about Grace Jones, because a large number. I mean, I've been to London a few times, but I don't know it the way you do. But much of your Black population comes to England by way of Jamaica, so they look a bit like Grace Jones. They're very dark. In America, there is a kind of hierarchy of racism, right? If you are like Whitney Houston, that is on the shelf behind you, if you're light-skinned like Whitney, you are less likely to be the subject of racism. But Grace Jones, she was a very black woman. And she used that. I mean, at first, she was not accepted. But when she went to Europe, they saw that as a plus. And they saw her blackness as something really cool. And then she rose up through the modeling world because of her difference, not in spite of it. Yes. And I think that is a big model for LGBT experience. Because what it says is you don't have to trim away your eccentricities. You don't have to monitor your language or your speech or the way you cross your legs or the way you hold your wrist. You can do what you want, be who you are, and really embrace it to the fullest extent and be not only accepted, but exonerated. So many LGBTQ people, whether they are trans, whether they're lesbian, bi, whatever, we have a big respect for Grace Jones because she models for us a kind of queerness.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's a big part of the diva, why we love the divas, and particularly why we love Grace Jones.
Well, and I'm really glad you got to meet her almost naked. It's
lovely to hear that story as well, because in this interview, actually, there's this very sweet moment where she offers Richard Cook some champagne. Obviously, they're getting on well, and it's lovely to hear that. And initially, he kind of demurs. And then she's like, "Are you sure?" And then he says, "Yeah, all right. I'll have some champagne." And then they drink champagne together. And it's just like there's a lovely atmosphere throughout this interview, and and hearing you tell your Grace Jones story just now, which sounds just incredible. I mean, you certainly can never stop writing now that you've been told by her not to.
Yeah,
there's no two ways about it. I'm afraid you're going to have to keep going. It's great. It's lovely. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Something I'll take to my grave.
So yeah, I mean, quite apart from her image and talking about the Bond film and so on, they do come on to talk about her music and the way that she's evolved her music and found her voice through music, which is interesting because she actually reflects very openly and honestly about how in the beginning she didn't really know what she wanted to say through her music, or didn't have the chops in a way to express herself in the way that she wanted to, but that she's actually found that and overcome her image overpowering her music. That's the phrase that she uses. And the last clip that we're going to listen to is where she talks about recording Slave to the Rhythm with Trevor Horn and Bruce Woolley after a 3-year break from making music.
I'm just playing around, baby. I'm writing our album. I'll be collaborating with it. I've already started collaborating with Bruce Woolley, who works with Trevor. And then I did a single. Well, I'm still working on it with Trevor for Best of Album. The only single which will come out this summer on Iron label, and the album will come out on Manhattan label. So, I mean, I'm still... The break that I took with films, actually, I mean, the time... I love extremes like that. I mean, I couldn't wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning, and film is that. And music is starting at, 5 in the evening to 5 in the morning. And I like that, that's more my world. To the river, to the river.
I loved how you described in the book Slave to the Rhythm as suggesting Star Wars meets the 10 Commandments. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
fantastic.
and think about how just a few years before that, the music ideal was distorted guitars, bass, and drums, really simple, really stripped down, no overproduction, 2 minutes long, in, out, bing, bang, boom. And then Grace Jones is like, oh no, the total opposite can be totally cool, to have synthesizers and
synclaviers
synclaviers, the go-go rhythms of I think it's Trouble Funk playing on it, and everything that Trevor Horn can do, and Bruce Woolley, a really good pop songsmith. So she brought together all sorts of worlds that are thought to be antithetical. And I think that's a really marvelous thing to be able to do.
100% agree.
As sort of to make just a general point about the book, we're sort of coming towards the end of the episode. And I just wanted to say that the way you've written the book, some of the chapters are really short, some are much longer. And as William has said, you write about such a sort of diverse breadth of artists. And it just, my God, it really made me appreciate, the disproportionately huge contribution that LGBTQ artists have made to popular music. I mean, when you read your book, it's like, yeah, they're the most important people in pop music. I mean, because I'm not just talking about the artists. I'm talking about so many of the people behind the scenes. I mean, I didn't know Larry Uttal was gay, for example. So you point that out about so many of the people involved in the making of incredible records. And I mean, it really is. I mean, one always hears like 10% of the world's people are gay. Well, I mean, it's reading your book, it's like 60% of the greatest music has been made by gay artists. I mean, so I that was thrilling to me. And I don't know if that occurred to you as you were researching and working on it.
I guess it's something that's sort of a given to me, but right. I do think, I had, even though I decided I needed to put some parameters on it. So instead, I was going to go to the beginning of recorded music with Bessie Smith and those people, and go to the present day. And I realized if I want to have some depth to my writing, and I knew there'd be songs I'd want to write a page or more about, I had to narrow it down. So it starts with the Stonewall riots and goes to the end of the millennium, where at that point everyone's getting online, and gay people, they don't necessarily need music as a way of learning about themselves. They can learn about themselves directly through other gay people, through chat, whatever it is, social media, whatever. But I did have to go back to like, okay, what are the roots of this? well, some of the roots of this were queer, like Little Richard and Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who many people had forgotten about or never knew about. And she was one of the, she was a Black woman who was in the gospel world, but she played rock and roll guitar, and she did it arguably before just about anyone else.
Indeed.
So the foundations of this music really they come back to queer experience, Black experience, Black queer experience, Black female experience. It's not just about the white guys that we have been hearing about and seeing as and I should say straight white guys. Or it could be like they could be straight like Depeche Mode, but have a really like profound thread of queerness running through them, whether it's their leather or the outsider sexual themes of their songs. And I think all that stuff is even the more extreme because those acts, even Bowie, there was only a brief window brief windows, I should say, when he was fully mainstream in America.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that stuff is making you that my book is opening your eyes to what's been there all along.
Yes. Exactly.
Sometimes you need a book to do that, and I am thrilled that you're telling me that it's my book, because that's what I was kind of hoping for. I wanted to leave, I'm not a young guy anymore. I still feel young, but I wanted to leave something behind that younger people like you, William, could understand what my generation and also the generation before me had to endure and sort of pass along to you folks the lessons that we learned, and so you can learn from it and build your own thing, but be aware of the history that came before you too.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about Mighty Real, Barry. We usually end the episodes with just references to a handful of the pieces we've added to Rock's Back Pages in the last couple of weeks or so. And I know Jasper will be itching to tell us about a gig he saw last night. So maybe we could just start with that.
Well, I am definitely itching to tell you about it, but I think we'll go through chronologically. So
Okay.
we'll start with William's pieces because they precede mine in time. So we'll go
and jump in, Barry. If anything occurs to you to comment on, then by all means, just jump in. So, William.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming on, Barry. It's been really, really interesting. And I'm sure you'll be able to talk about this one. This is Max Bell reviewing Ray Davies at the Queen Elizabeth Hall on the 11th of March in 1997. And he starts by saying, music and memoir provide the basis for Ray Davies' entertaining storyteller show. Coming on stage clutching a well-thumbed sheaf of papers from his autobiography, X-Ray, and a battered briefcase, Davies resembled a Hornsey Art College lecturer in his tatty jacket and drainpipe jeans. The reminiscences that followed had the same scruffy but comfortable qualities. Ray Davies revealed himself to be part actor, part mimic, as he played out the relevant roles of camp old managers, music mogul Larry Page, his brother Dave, cross-dressing pals, groupies, and John Lennon, always with an ear for nuance and a telling line in metropolitan sardonic. Now, I thought this was just a really interesting piece with regard to Mighty Real, because I read your chapter on the Kinks and I was really interested in the idea of vaudeville or music hall being a precursor to some of that queer 60s pop music coming through the cracks of the lyrics. Max Bell goes on to talk about the vaudevillian spirit in Ray's work. So, yeah, I just thought it's an interesting comparison.
Well, vaudeville, particularly the British version, that's something that we have to, like, as Americans, we didn't grow up in, and we don't have the history of it. But I mean, that's really sort of what the Beatles did. They really embraced. They were big fans of R&B. They could play it. They knew it. They understood it. But they brought in music hall melodies. They brought in things from their parents' generation and integrated it into a way that was really hip and youthful and countercultural. And, you know, it was not, they were not men's men. They were campy sometimes, especially when they would, you know, when a reporter would stick a microphone in front of them, they would be very clever, very like they modeled Englishness to us.
Yeah, right. You compare them to Oscar Wilde, I think, in the book, which was apt.
Yeah, and I remember that as a kid watching those interviews and thinking, that's really cool. You can answer a question with a joke and be smart and funny at the same time. I think that was something that I aspired to be. And also, I think I learned that if you have a sense of humor, then you can get past the gatekeepers, right? If you make the gatekeepers laugh, they'll keep their hands off the door long enough to let you in. And I think really the Kinks did that, especially when I learned that we had thought that the Kinks were barred from America because the brothers were fighting on stage, and well, apparently it's because one of the American Federation of Telecasters or something called Dave a fairy or a faggot, and Ray saw it and smacked him. So the reason why they were not allowed in America and why they didn't have like an amazing hit like Waterloo Sunset, why that didn't even chart in America, and why Ray came back with something not like acceptable, not straight, not like comfortable, but he came back with a song about falling in love with either a drag queen or a transsexual. And it's both funny and it's yet really sincere at the same time. It has that double meaning that's so important to gay culture. And yeah, what an incredible record Lola was. And it probably wouldn't have happened had the Kinks themselves not been victims of homophobia. I don't know how much Ray knew about Dave, because Dave did have romantic, like they were affectional as well as physical relationships with gay men. So he was not 100. I mean, he's married and most people think of him as straight, but he's not completely straight. And that is part of the whole Kinks identity that's signaled right in the name.
Yeah. Well, I think America's all the poorer for not having embraced the Kinks as much as England has had the chance to.
Exactly.
She walked up to me and she asked me to dance. I asked her her name, and in a dark brown voice she said Lola. Hello, la 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 la.
What's next up on the runway? Jasper, are you now going to treat us to
first a brief thing and then the much anticipated concert? I mean, certainly the concert itself. Anyway, first, Kylie Minogue. Paul Dunoyer recently coming on board as a writer after his appearance on this podcast, which is fantastic, and this great review of 5 reissues, the albums 2000 to 2010, writing in The Word in August 2011. 5 reissues show the second part of Operation Kylie radically surpasses the first. And he begins Who does not like Kylie? There seems nearly universal agreement that our pop princess is a good thing. She's famously a gay icon, but it's a rare hetero male who doesn't admire her too. Kylie's bum alone has done more to promote human happiness than most schemes for global progress. Indie boys such as the Manic Street Preachers, elders of a tribe that hates quote-unquote manufactured pop on principle, want to work with her. The edgiest of DJs like to remix her. Prudent politicians would sooner call for the slaughter of firstborn kittens than have a go at Kylie. Now, I find this a really interesting intro to a piece about Kylie because she went from being one of the most maligned, quote, manufactured pop stars, you know, in the Stock Aitken Waterman era, to being a sort of bona fide national treasure. And not that she's even, you know, she's British, but there is this sort of warmth of sentiment towards her now. So I just like that, you know, that. It does make me wonder about that shift in culture generally as to how we write about, you know, pop stars, how we consider pop stars, particularly women, obviously, and their roles within music. But I just thought it was interesting to read that section.
Great.
Yeah, it dawned on me that I've talked about people who are left of center, who are come up from the underground and embrace their difference. But I also, there's also a strand of LGBTQ culture that embraces the unapologetically mainstream, like Kylie, like ABBA, like Olivia Newton-John and Cher. And we do it in a way, I think because we've been told we're not cool, right? Like, if you grow up gay, you get this, you're told in so many ways that you're not up to snuff. And you learn to say to yourself, hey, I like Cher, I like ABBA, or whatever. And we can like it and make it cool amongst ourselves. Through our fandom. And I think that kind of fandom, social media and computers and the internet embrace that, because we can be sort of cultish about these very non-culty acts like Kylie and ABBA.
Absolutely. And actually it's sincere appreciation of something that is by the mainstream deemed to be light and frivolous. Taking it seriously is the radical act in that instance. So that what you've just said completely, you know, tracks.
Yes. Well, Stock Aitken and Waterman records were not as pervasive in America as they were in England. We had some of them, and some of them were huge, inescapable hits like Rick Astley and Bananarama's version of Venus. But Kylie did not have much of a significant chart history in America. It's been very sporadic.
Yes.
So in some ways, she is both very mainstream and very cultish in America.
Lastly, then, Rosalía. I'll talk about this review of Lux, which is the album that came out last year, written by Ludovic Hunter Tilney in the Financial Times, 6th of November 2025, because I went to see the Lux tour last night at the O2 here in London and had just the most amazing time. And the way that Ludovic Hunter Tilney writes about the album tracks very much with how the show was. He says, Rosalía's new album arrives with a kind of conceptual grandeur that would make a prog rock band jealous and record label bean counters nervous. She mostly sings in Spanish, but also uses a dozen other languages, including Mandarin, Arabic, and Ukrainian. And then this bit really works well for me in the context of the show, which is that he says, Reliquia, the song, illustrates a recurrent theme of worldly corruption versus heavenly grace, with restless movements between soaring orchestrations and knotty beat switch-ups. The results are striking but unsettled. The disparate ingredients come together more successfully in Porcelana, a symphonic hip-hop track with flamenco handclaps and semi-rap vocals, partly in Japanese, Latin, and English. What ought to be chimerical is made to seem gripping and coherent. And the show last night was just mind-blowing. I mean, she is a genius. The performance was ambitious and breathtaking and high concept and magical, but at the same time somehow honest and reflective and genuine and real. And there were so many interesting ideas. She had a whole live orchestra but also the synthesized bass elements just made your whole body vibrate. So there was all this sort of duality and combination of different elements that just worked so well. For whatever reason, she covered Can't Take My Eyes Off You, but made it work flawlessly as a meta-commentary on the art of the performance itself by positioning herself as an artwork in a frame in a gallery being admired by her backup dancers. I mean, it was just an extraordinary show. And yeah, I'm in awe of her as a performer and loved the album and loved Motomami as well. And she played some tracks from that. And it was just the best time. It was an amazing conceptual arena show that was, despite all the high conceptness, just an amazing time as well. It was remarkable.
Oh, good. I'm so glad it was great.
That's wonderful. And I think although you haven't commented on that, I'm sure that part of why you're saying this is because she is a part of music history that Madonna brought the real spectacle of Blonde Ambition and then all the tours that followed. Björk, with her just sort of willful, I'm not a part of the Anglo-American contingents, combination. I come from a magical, ethereal world that you don't know about, but I'm going to make you love it. And she does it through her love of nature. So it's sort of paradoxical. But the whole pop spectacle stuff has been very much a part of gay culture. The costume changes and the stylistic changes and we're not going to give you the same arrangement song after song. We're going to switch it up and be willfully artificial, right? You talked about her doing that. And I think Bowie did that. I think Grace Jones did that. I think Madonna and even the Jacksons created alternate universes. And it's not thought of something that's apart from the whole rock founded center of music. It's broader than that. And it now occupies the center of music, as well as the margins. It does it simultaneously. Yeah. And that, I think, is a very queer thing.
Yeah, and it was a very queer crowd last night. And there was a great section. There are some pretty heavy religious over and undertones on Lux and in the show and in the visuals and all of that. But she had a confessional live on stage with Cara Delevingne last night. The night before it was Lola Young. And in Cara Delevingne's confessional, she was talking about how she thinks that nobody is 100% straight. So that feels like a very apt way to kind of maybe wrap up
the episode. Oh, well, fantastic. Yeah, great. I mean, she's an extraordinary artist and glad you were able to see her. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 227 of the Rock's Back Pages podcast. Our deep thanks to Barry Walters for getting up maybe a little earlier than he usually does to talk from California about his book, Mighty Real, which is published this week and available from, as they used to say, all good bookshops.
I'm thrilled that so far the world loves Mighty Real, and so grateful that you have invited me to talk about it.
Oh, thank you so much, Barry. Well,
Thanks,
we wish you the very best of luck with it. Please do follow our podcast on whichever platforms you use and consider subscribing to Rock's Back Pages itself. We'll be back in a fortnight with a legendary 60s pop scribe, Maureen O'Grady. So it's farewell from us, and it's farewell from our guest, Barry Walters. And all together now, goodbye.
That concludes episode 227 of the Rock's Back Pages podcast. Many thanks to special guest Barry Walters. Mighty Real, A History of LGBTQ Music, 1969 to 2000, is published by Viking and available now from all good bookshops. Visit Barry's website at barrywalterswriter.com. The hosts are Barney Hoskins and William Pike, and it was co-hosted and produced by Jasper, Muris and Bowie. The Rock's Back Pages podcast is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. You can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews, at rocksbackpages.com.